Aha! We've returned for more Mega Man retrospectives.
It makes me question why!
And I'm really excited about this one, because we get to talk about my favorite Mega Man series in general. I love Legends, don't get me wrong. I adore Legends. But the second Mega Man game I ever played was part of my favorite series, which I didn't realize was my favorite Mega Man series at the time, because I hadn't played it before. And I was so mystified when I first played it, because it was on the PlayStation, and I was looking at it and I was like, this is a side-scroller. It's 2D. And I guess in my young mind I was like, Genesis is 2D, no 3D. Even though I owned a few 3D Genesis games, like F-22, go figure. But PlayStation was all 3D and cool, and then but this Mega Man was like, you know what? Outside of Legends, we're gonna do what we know, and we're gonna do it really well. And that game was, of course, Mega Man X4. Holy crap! This game blew my little tiny mind just out of the water. It was so cool! And as much as I would love to talk about it, it's the retrospective. And I have to talk about the whole series now that I'm at it. So we're going to take a step backward, because as I'm sure many of you already noticed, this is Mega Man X4. There are 3 games before this that we have to talk about. Now, before I get into the main series, I will mention that I am acutely aware that the Mega Man X series has a few spin-off titles, such as the Extreme series and the Game Boy Color, which are excellent games, as well as Command Mission, which I have not played at this time. But I'm not going to talk about those, though, because the Extreme games are kind of remakes, kind of ports. They're a little weird, but they're very good. And I, like I said, haven't played Command Mission. It's an entirely different kind of game. We're going to stick to the main series, the main games, for the benefit of just... whew. There's a lot to talk about. So Mega Man X was a Super Nintendo game, and as I'm sure most of you are well aware, I owned a Genesis when I was young, so it was a while before I actually got a chance to play Mega Man X. I knew a kid who had it, but he never actually let me play it, because I didn't really have any friends. But I knew of it, and I had seen him play it, but I myself hadn't actually played it until I wound up owning the Mega Man X collection on the GameCube. As for Mega Man X specifically, well, it's probably one of the best Super Nintendo games I personally have ever played. It's right there with Star Fox. I love this game. It is such a good, solid platformer for the console, and I'm legitimately surprised because usually with older games that I didn't play as a kid, since there's no nostalgia goggles, I'm a bit rougher on them, and I don't really care for them as much. I usually try to respect them because I have to acknowledge that they're dated, but in Mega Man X's case, I don't think it's aged badly in any way. It's still a ton of fun to play. It's still a great game, and I still would highly recommend it. The Mega Man X series is sort of a sequel series to the original classic Mega Man, which we'll talk about in the next part, by the way. The original classics, again, are very good on their own, but they were a bit more cartoony in style, I would say, and the plots were a bit less serious. I mean, the plots existed, but they were NES games, so it was just more about, oh, Dr. Wily, evil, quick, stop him! But now, like, X is trying to introduce, like, a serious take on the lore, introducing supporting characters like Zero, who's amazing, I'll get to him, as well as an intimidating villain in the form of Sigma, who wants to take control of the world and establish Reploid dominance. See, Mega Man X is, again, much like Mega Man Trigger, not the original Mega Man. He is technically the second Mega Man in the overall timeline, and he was designed by Dr. Light, the creator of the original classic Mega Man, to be effectively the next step in terms of artificial intelligence and robotics. X means an undefined variable, because Dr. Light designed Mega Man X to be an unknown. He is capable of so much that even Dr. Light, as his designer, wasn't sure how far he could go. X was designed to be as close to human as a robot could come with Dr. Light's expertise. And there are still a lot of things to this day that we don't know about X. He was capable of so much more than the games even let on. As for what Reploids are, well, technically X is considered a Reploid as well as Zero, but neither of them are really Reploids in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they are, but they aren't. All Reploids that aren't Zero are based directly on X. See, X was sealed in a pod by Dr. Light because Dr. Light wasn't going to be able to finish him in time. Dr. Light was getting old because, you know, humans, they die. It's a thing that occurs. We age. So Dr. Light sealed him underground and programmed the capsule to send him through basically empathy trials. It was a design to make sure that X wouldn't go rogue and just try to kill everybody. He wanted to make sure X stood up for justice and really tried to benefit humanity. So for 30 years, X's programs were run through these trials to make absolutely certain that he was safe to unleash on the world. And it was another 100 years or so before a guy by the name of Dr. Kane, not my friend Kane, the Dr. Kane. Not the Dr. Kane that sees me in the clinic every day to make sure that I haven't completely lost my mind. Wait, what? Where did that come from? I'm not in a clinic, I'm in my room. Right? Anyway, Dr. Kane found X, but he was never able to fully analyze X's systems. So he was able to create the Reploids, and the Reploids are based on X, but there's still a lot of stuff about X that is unknown. We just don't know about it. Zero is his own special case too, but I'll talk about him once we get to X4. He is loosely involved in the first 3 games, but his plot really doesn't come out till then. As for the first game, like I said, you have to stop Sigma. X and Zero are both Maverick hunters. Mavericks are basically Reploids that have gone rogue and are trying to do bad stuff. It's actually a pretty generic term, to be honest. There are Mavericks like Sigma who are trying to completely destroy humanity, but sometimes Maverick can be as simple as like a Reploid who robbed a bank or cheated on his taxes or something. I mean, technically they're all like that. Any Reploid that is considered aberrant. In the original Japanese, they're referred to as irregulars. This was changed in English to Maverick, which, you know, they basically mean the same thing in this context. I'm pretty sure, though I haven't gotten concrete evidence on this, that this was changed because irregulars in English can also be used to refer to like social undesirables, like people who are born with disabilities or even different races. It's a charged word in English, so I kind of see why they would change that. That's my assumption. Again, I don't know that for sure, but I believe that may have been the case. In any event, you know what we're doing. The Maverick Hunters are assigned to stop Mavericks, and Sigma is staging a massive rebellion to destroy humanity. So X has to stop them. Much like the classic series, you wind up fighting through 8 different Mavericks, not Robot Masters, Mavericks in this case, and you get to steal their power and fight through levels and use weaknesses to kill other bosses faster. It's a lot of fun. Like, it's still got the classic Mega Man feel, but the difference between classic and X, I would say, overall, is the speed. X is so much faster paced. It helps that you can wall slide, which is a great feature, and I love that they added it, and it will be a mainstay in the entire series. Being able to jump up and down walls completely changes how they could design levels. In addition, once you grab the dash boots in this game, you can dash, and this also makes the game much faster, utilizing the dash to jump farther, to dodge enemies' attacks. Again, it's all much faster. So it just feels much better to play, in my opinion. I like the feeling of control I'm given, and I also like the speed. And maybe this is coming from me because I'm a Sonic player. You know, when it comes to side-scrollers, I usually like Sonic. X is kind of the fast version of classic Mega Man. The speed element is definitely there. So, you know, I guess that's kind of why I tend to lean towards it. Of course, you still have stuff like the charge shot and using different abilities and platforming and stuff like that. There are elements from the classic series here, but it's all sped up and done in a more concise way that I really like. The game looks great and sounds great. The music in X is awesome, and I love it. Also, the game allows you to get armor for X, where you find different armor pieces and eventually complete the armors. For the first 4 games, the armors were called 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Once you get to the 5th, they started actually naming them names that were fun. Although sometimes X4 translates the 4th armor as Force Armor, I think that's just an English thing, and it may not have even been intentional, but to be honest, I kind of prefer calling it the Force Armor because it just sounds cooler than just 4th Armor. Like, it's just so boring. Anyway, you gotta get the first armor in this game. And the first armor enhances all of X's abilities, limits damage, and gives him the ability to dash, like I said. The dash is something that would be added later as a default option for X, but in this game you have to get the armor piece. However, they were nice and put this particular armor piece on the main path in Chill Penguin stage. So it's pretty much impossible to miss. That really helps because one of the game's flaws, I feel, is you pretty much need the dash to get through it. I understand that they put it on the main path, but what if you didn't start with that level? Like, a lot of the level design in the game seems to be centered around the idea of you having the dash. So if you say Chill Penguin for last for whatever reason on your first playthrough, you're gonna have a harder time of it. Outside of that, the game is balanced really well, the bosses are fun, and everything's pretty good, right up until the final boss fight with Sigma, which you beat up his dog, for whatever reason, then you fight him. Then his second form is, I'm gonna use this word a lot, unreasonable. This is where the game's difficulty just spikes into the ceiling. And I don't even know why that is. It was so well balanced until this point, but this final form is just like ridiculous. And I don't even understand why. He's a wall. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, this is where the game gets pretty difficult. I mean, it doesn't get too hard. I wouldn't say it ruins the experience. It's nice to have a final boss fight that's actually tough, but I just wanted to warn you ahead of time. Naturally, with the success of X, there would be Mega Man X2. But if I'm being brutally honest, I'm not crazy about X2 for a few reasons. It's designed in like a really odd way. And on the surface, it seems very normal and pretty much the same as X. And from a control perspective, it's still just as fun to play. The dash is default, which is great now. The armor gives you different abilities this time. They really got creative with that. And, you know, the level design is all right. Like, there's nothing really wrong there. It's the bosses and the way they handled the story that I really don't like. To begin with, Zero sacrifices himself to save X in the first game. So X2 is basically about this group of Mavericks finding Zero's parts and wanting to reassemble him and turn him to evil. And there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Zero, but none of this is going to be really explained until X4. So I'm not sure whether this was all planned or not. In addition, the way they handle this whole part getting system is really irritating. So, in order to get the parts back, you have to fight the three guys that make up, you know, this group of Mavericks. They appear randomly in various stages. But see, what's relevant is that you think, okay, well, I'll just save them for last and do the regular Mavericks first. No, you fool. You can't do that, because eventually, as you progress through the game, they'll just stop appearing. Like, one will dip out, then another will dip out, and eventually you just can't fight them at all. So basically, unless you zero in on these guys first, you won't be able to get the good ending of the game. Which is really friggin' lame, by the way. I don't even get why, because once you beat all the regular Mavericks, they still back the parts you got anyway. So, what was the point of getting them, other than just telling the game I want the good ending? What? And on top of that, okay, so y'all went out into, you know, onto the map to slow down X, and you brought Zero's parts with you, so I could take them back. Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. That's ridiculous. This is not the kind of writing I generally expect from the X series. The story in X is very, very good, but this just seems really weak and weird. It doesn't help that I feel like a lot of the Mavericks in this game, particularly Mr. Never Smile at a Crocodile over here, aren't very much fun. Like, I really hate this one in particular, because, like, he's not even hard. He just is tedious, because all he does is hide under the oil, and you just have to wait for him to show his stupid face. Even with his weakness, he is so time-consuming, purely because he doesn't want to show up. It's mind-numbing. And getting the armors in this game is way more difficult than it has to be. This game involves a lot of backtracking to various levels, and that's not unheard of in the series, but I feel like X2 got a little carried away with this. So, for example, you need to get Mr. Never Smile at a Crocodile's ability to get the air dash boots. Okay, fine. In order to get the armor in Crocodile's freaking level, you need the air dash. So you have to go to the level, kill him, go back to the other level to get the air dash boots, then go back into Crocodile's level to get that, and again, not abnormal, but the entire game is like this, where you're going into other levels to do specific things where you wouldn't even normally consider that. It just feels like a time waster. And it doesn't help that some of the bosses, late game, get a little irritating. And if you don't get the good ending, you have to fight 3 bosses at the end of the game as opposed to only 2 forms of Sigma. You gotta fight Copy 0 at the end of it, instead of just the 2 forms of Sigma. Sigma, again, is pretty difficult, but I don't think he's as hard as the first X game, and I don't mind him being hard, again, final boss, but it just wasn't very much fun to get through X2 as it was the original X. It has its moments, but I feel like if it weren't for the fact that this is the entire plot line to reviving Zero, and he's super relevant to the rest of the series, I feel like it could be skipped entirely, much like X3. X3 can be skipped entirely, literally. There's almost no reason to play this game. I'll be real with you. I don't like X3 whatsoever. There's a variety of reasons for that, but I'll talk about the positives first. I think the music's pretty good, and the graphics are nice as usual. Level design is alright, but I feel like some levels can be a little bit too irritating. And it's not the level design in itself, it's that the enemies you fight in the levels are way smarter. A lot of enemies in this game are capable of actually countering the default moves you would normally use, so you actually have to think about how to approach situations in each level. It really bogs down the game when you have to overthink every situation you're in. I understand making the Mavericks hard, and believe me, the Mavericks in X3 are a little ridiculous, but at least there, those are bosses, and I'm okay with that. But for the entire game to just beat the tar out of you, it's just not enjoyable, and it's kind of X3's big deal. Usually I don't complain about a game being too hard, but, and this is speaking as someone who has played X since he was a kid, and most of the good X games I'm really good at. It's not a flex, I'm just saying that I could play X4 and X5 blindfolded. But X3, even for me, is a little ridiculous, and I just really don't know why. I don't know why they would have gone out of their way to make this game so unreasonable, but they did. Even on the fan wiki, it's mentioned on X3's page that it is known for its extreme difficulty. And I guess if you're looking for a challenge, yeah, X3 is gonna give it to you. But man, I don't know. I don't know any of this. Look. There's another game later in the X series that is also known for its difficulty, but at least with that one, it's fun. It makes me laugh at how stupidly designed it is. But X3 isn't stupidly designed. They intended it to be like this. And it's just, why? Why would you do that? It has its moments. To begin with, this is the first game in the series where you can actually play as Zero. It's in a limited capacity, but it's there. And that's awesome. I love Zero. Zero's a great character, one of my favorite Mega Man characters in the whole series. And being able to play as him is really nice, but like I said, it's limited. You can only use him sparingly during the levels, and if he goes down, you can't actually use him again as far as I know. I'm not sure there's a way to get him back, but I believe once he's gone, he's gone. So, utilizing him really isn't a good idea unless you really have to. Also, the game's level up system in terms of its armor and chips and land armor, oh boy, it got a little out of control. Like, okay, there's 4 pieces to the 3rd armor. That's all fine. But then you get chips that you could use for the armor to buff certain pieces of it, but you only get 1 chip, unless of course you don't get any of the chips, and then get to one of the final levels of the game, and then find the golden chip thing that gives you all the benefits of all the chips and turns the armor gold, and then you get the golden 3rd armor, so that's really nice. And then, if you wait to use Zero until a very specific time, during, again, one of the final levels, Zero gets damaged by like a boss that you wouldn't normally fight, and then he gives you the Z-Saber, which makes you really powerful. And of course, you can also get the land armors during the game that you could summon and then use to unlock certain other aspects of the game. And it's too complicated. Part of the joy of getting the armors in X and X2 is that it was simple. I mean, there were some secret stuff in those games, but it feels like in X3 they just jammed every idea they had, and it's just too much to keep track of. Just don't. Just don't. I don't need to think about this that much. Oh, and the Sigma fight? Yeah, pro tip, no. That is my response to that. Kaiser Sigma is unnecessary. This fight, in my opinion, is probably the hardest Sigma fight in the whole series. But I mean that. I've only beaten X3 one time, and that is by choice. I could run through it again if I wanted to. I'm sure I could, but it's not worth the migraine I get. It's just a tough game, and yeah, if you're into that, it'll do you fine, but I feel like it just winds up being a grind fest that just isn't that much fun to play. So I can't say I recommend 2 or 3. You can pretty much skip them and be fine. I mean, it's just my opinion. If you like them, great, that's fine, but I really don't enjoy playing either of those. X4, on the other hand, is amazing, and that's not just nostalgia talking. X4 is so well designed. To begin with, this was the first game you could play as Zero throughout the entire thing. There are 2 stories here, one for X and one for Zero. As for which story's canon, I lean towards Zero only because there's more development on his overall plot when compared to X's. X is kind of just there, just so you could play as X. It was clear they wanted to start revealing exactly what makes Zero so special. Like I said in the beginning of this video, X was made by Dr. Light, the creator of the original classic Mega Man, and he's also the, effectively the template for all Reploids that aren't Zero. Zero, technically speaking, isn't a Reploid at all. If you want to really narrow down what he is, he would be considered a robot master from classic Mega Man. Why is that? Because Zero is the ultimate masterpiece project of one Dr. Wily, the nemesis of the original Mega Man and Dr. Light. Zero was created as the ultimate destructive tool by Dr. Wily. He was never able to finish him because Dr. Wily could not get him to not be a violent maniac when he was first woken up. On top of that, Wily inserted a virus into Zero that causes Reploids to turn Maverick. Whether that's on purpose is unclear, because Wily wouldn't have known that Reploids would be a thing. It's possible, and this is just me theorizing now, that Wily actually meant that to take control of the more primitive robot AIs back then. But since Reploids are a bit more advanced, it just drives them nuts. This is also what happened to Sigma. He was one of the first ones to stumble onto Zero, and he barely survived that. Zero is unreasonably powerful, and even he's not sure how powerful he can get. Much like X, there's an unknown when it comes to Zero. Nobody really understands his infrastructure. He's wholly unique. Now, Zero has no memory of being created by Dr. Wily, nor does he remember being so violent, being a Maverick. He doesn't recall. Anyway, as for X4, oh my god, X4 is so freaking good. You can play as Zero, go through with his sword, slash things around, fight a bunch of bosses. On the surface, it's pretty basic, but man, is it fun to play. It is so satisfying. My personal opinion, I like playing as Zero more than X, but that's just me. If you want to play as X, by all means, he has his own story involved here. And again, it's all about stopping Sigma. This time it has everything to do with the Repliforce, who Sigma is manipulating to rebel against humanity. You might be saying, you didn't mention X3's plot. I know, I didn't. And the story gets so much better in X4, especially on Zero's side, not just to do with his past, but he has so many more connections with the characters. Introducing Colonel, who's kind of a rival character to Zero, they have a mutual respect for one another, they don't really want to fight, but they have to. And then Iris, who's the Colonel's sister, who's like head over heels in love with Zero, and then horrible things happen, and it's just, yo. And also, Sigma dresses as the Grim Reaper this time, because he's lost all subtlety. I assume. Next, of course, gets armor, and this time they went back to basics and give you, well, technically 5 pieces, because there's 2 different guns you can get. But other than that, it's pretty much the same back to basics for X. But there's a beauty in that. All the Mavericks are well designed, the game is fun, the level design is great. I would play X4 any day of the week. It is such a good game. Following that, there's X5. Now, X5 was originally supposed to be the cap on this series. It wasn't supposed to go beyond this. The way Inafune had written it, he wanted to do 5 and then move into the Mega Man Zero series. Now, that is a different series entirely, and we're going to talk about that much later. But X5 won't be the last in the X series because reasons I'll get to. As for X5 itself, it's great. It's easily my favorite X game by a considerable margin. There's so much good to say about it, I don't even know where to start. Again, you could start the game out as X or Zero, but this time, instead of two branching, questionably which one is canon stories, both of them share the same story, and you can actually choose which one you take into each individual level. There's a character select screen before every single level. You can also choose to select X without armor, as well as one of 4 possible armors for X. Zero, also a new thing, gets an upgrade in the form of Black Zero, which buffs his attack and defense. This was an X4 through a code, but from what I understand in that game, it offered no benefits and was just a palette swap. X's ultimate armor was also an X4 through a code, and that actually did benefit him. But in this game, it's much stronger. In fact, the ultimate armor completely breaks the game, if I'm being completely honest. But it is the ultimate armor, so fair enough. As for the other armors, well, if you start the game with this, you get a slightly weaker version of the 4th armor from X4. If you start the game with Zero, you get his blaster, which is horrible. Don't actually do that. It's awful. During the game, you get the glide armor, which allows X to fly, and that's pretty neat, as well as the Gaia armor, which doesn't allow you to use any of X's abilities, is really slow, but makes X hit like a truck and a tank. This is the most defensive armor that X has ever had, and it's honestly kind of interesting. It's so defensive that X can walk on spikes. Yeah, I bet you've never seen Mega Man do that ever. Spikes are deadly. Like, nobody touches spikes in a Mega Man game, unless you're wearing the Gaia armor, as well as a few armors later that also do the same thing. In any event, the plot here is that Sigma manages to release a new version of the Maverick virus. They're calling it the Sigma virus, but there's also a strain called the Zero virus. See, the reality was that Zero was always the carrier of the Maverick virus without anyone realizing it. It doesn't even affect him. It doesn't affect X either. But Sigma releases the virus all over the world, causing a bunch of Mavericks to go crazy, as well as trying to cause a space colony Eurasia to crash into the planet, destroying it. It's a pretty serious story that's told in a really good way. For the first time in the series, we really get a glimpse into how the Maverick Hunters actually operate together in terms of new team members such as Aaliyah or Douglas or the leader Cygnus, as well as seeing Zero and X interact more in general. It's nice to see these two actually speak to one another, since, believe it or not, this doesn't happen super often in most of the previous X games prior to now. X5 is so much fun to play, even if you decide to utilize the ultimate armor, which completely breaks the game because its Nova attack is freaking stupid. Seriously, it never runs out. You just keep doing this forever, and you win. So dumb. So dumb. You could also fight Rang to Bang! Rang to Bang! Yeah. As I said, X5 ended, and it was meant to be the last X game. Inafune wanted to move on to other projects, but Capcom said, there's money to be made here. We will make a new X, X6. X's development was started without consulting Inafune at all. Now, to be fair, Capcom was completely within their rights to do that. They have the rights to the games. Inafune does not. But it's still kind of a rude thing to do when you don't tell your story writer that you're completely screwed up the tale he was crafting. Inafune apparently literally had to rewrite the beginning of the Zero series to compensate for the fact that X6 even exists at all. And I'm a little softer towards X6 as a game because I think it's so funny. It will never cease to amuse me because it's such a poorly designed game from a lot of standpoints. It's clear that they didn't have time much to test it, and it's just, yo, wow. But talking about good points, I kind of like a lot of the ideas in X6. See, at the end of X5, Zero dies. I'll just tell you that right now. Zero's gone. So X6 was picking up where it left off, where X has the Z-Saber, and now you get a game where X is, carrying on the spirit of his best friend, as well as utilizing, his best friend's main weapon. You get Mega Man's Buster Gun, as well as the Z-Saber. And though he's not as skilled as the Saber as Zero was, it still changes up the gameplay in a really interesting way. It's kind of like what the Mega Man Zero series wound up doing, but predating that. I like the concept. I like the notion of playing as Mega Man after the events of X5. It's not like X ceased to exist and he stopped being a Maverick Hunter. So playing a game featuring him with a new villain and a different story is not the worst concept in the world. I am down for this, except they kind of screwed it up in a lot of ways. From a plot perspective, first of all, they bring back Zero completely unceremoniously, and I really hated that. I like Zero, love Zero, great character, but they bring him back in such a stupid way. Like, they don't even bother to explain it. He's just like, I hid myself while I repaired myself. How did you even begin to do that? Pretty sure you were not in a position to even attempt such a thing. I'm gonna be real with you. Also, like, it's just like a thing that just happens in the story. Like, oh, Zero's back, okay, good talk. Just carry on like normal. Like, this isn't a really big deal. Like, at least when Shadow returned back immediately after Adventure 2, completely ruining that game's ending as well. At least there, Sega attempted to try to make this some kind of mystery and have a lot of, character moments behind his return. It wasn't just a thing that just happened and then we're not gonna talk about it again. Like, there's literally 2 games about this exact thing. They also changed Zero's gameplay, and I really hate that because his gameplay was so solid. And now, well, okay. Zero was always kind of a glass cannon since X4, but here they went completely over that threshold to the point that getting hit as Zero is just ill-advised. Don't ever do that. He does hit really hard, he has new combo moves, and that's cool, and I'm capable as playing as him, but it definitely isn't nearly as fun as it felt in X4 and 5. Doesn't help that even if you play as Mega Man X, you're still not going to have a good time due to a variety of design issues. For one thing, if I have to fight one more of these donuts, I'm gonna scream.
What? No. No! You can't do this to me! Why? What is the matter with you?
You fight 5 of these stupid things in one level, and every level has a weird-ass stupid gimmick, and that's normal, but it feels like all of them are annoying, and I don't know why they do that. It's just so unreasonably difficult, and especially when you get to Gate. Gate's the main villain, by the way. It's not Sigma this time, although you do wind up fighting a zombie version of them. You get to Gate's lab, and it's like, here's a wall of spikes. How do you get over it? You wanna know how? You seriously wanna know frickin' how? So, there's a few ways you can handle it. You could have the Shadow Armor, which I love, by the way, which doesn't get hurt on spikes. You could have the jump booster so you can jump over it. You could play as Zero and double jump, but even that's really hard to do. Or you could do my method and get over the first set, then intentionally get hit, and then get up the spikes while you're invincible. I should not have to be doing this, but this game is so spike happy, it's unreal. To get to the boss fight with Gate, you have to actually have the blade armor. This is mandatory, at least as X, because the blade armor is capable of dashing upwards as well as much further. Also, for some reason, the shadow armor is better at making your Z-Saber stronger, whereas the blade armor, which is supposed to augment the saber, doesn't do that. And I have no explanation for this. Anyway, you need to use the armor to get there. So basically, you need to fight Gate with the armor, which I think the shadow armor would be better at fighting Gate. So that's annoying. Gate's also, himself as a boss, weird. Most of the Mavericks, their designs are okay and their fights are fine, but the special bosses, they got creative. And in a way, I respect that. Gate is an interesting concept, but I also deeply resent it. Basically, you can't damage him at all yourself. You have to use his own attacks against him while avoiding damage on your own. That wouldn't be too bad if the room, wasn't just made of tiny islands. So you're gonna do a lot of running around, and you're probably gonna die a lot. It's fun. Hymax is also a really, really great fight. And by that I mean no. Again, they try to get creative where in order to damage Hymax, you have to hit him with a charge shot, which causes him to flash. Then you use literally any of the Mavericks moves, and then that damages him. And it does only chip damage. It takes forever to bring this sucker down. And it's so tedious this way. Again, I kind of appreciate the creativity they tried to do here to make the bosses seem really powerful. It works, but this game is so mean. It doesn't care about you. Suffer. That is X6's policy. X3 was hard, but it was that way by design. X6, I honestly don't think they meant it to be like this. It just turned out that way because they didn't test it, they didn't realize what they had crafted. And it's hilarious, but I wouldn't say I recommend it as a good game. It's not. It really isn't. It just makes me laugh. Weirdly, the final fight with Sigma is probably the easiest in the entire series. It kind of makes sense because he's pretty much like barely there, because he's kind of a zombie, and I kind of like the fight from an artistic perspective, like finishing him off as sort of a finality, but the fight itself is alarmingly simple, especially with the shadow armor. I really can't get over the shadow armor. I love this thing. I wish it was in any other game that wasn't this one because I would like at least enjoy using it. It's so cool. So ultimately, is X6 worth it? I mean, if you want to have a bad time, sure. Again, you just have to know what you're getting into. It's not a good game. It's probably the worst in the series thus far in terms of overall design. It's poorly designed, but it hits that weird threshold where it's so bad it's kind of good because it's funny. Like, as long as you don't take any of it super seriously, you're gonna at least enjoy yourself, because it's kind of like the I wanna be the guy of the X games. It's cruel, but it makes you laugh. I cannot say any of that about X7, which doesn't do anything. X7 was the first PS2 outing for X, and my god, I still cannot get over how badly they screwed up this game. This is, by a considerable margin, the worst X game. Arguably, the worst Mega Man game, period. And I'm not counting stuff like Mega Man Soccer and the DOS games. Who counts the DOS games? Yeah, it's bad, we get it. But in terms of like main series made by Capcom, actually supposed to be part of something serious, X7, by a considerable margin, is the worst. It sucks! It eats! I cannot get over how awful this thing is. To begin with, they tried for 3D, and okay, by PS2, I kind of get why you would at least attempt that. X4 through 6 look amazing visually with 2D sprites. And if you're gonna do 3D, okay, fine, but you better make sure it holds up as well as the 2D. Oh no, it doesn't. It looks awful. It's hideous. Just ugly and gross, and I hate it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't even look good by PS2 standards. I think I've seen better on PS1 sometimes. It depends on the game. It just doesn't. It doesn't even look like it belongs in the X series. But graphics don't make a game. What about, like, the music? The music's always been good, right? I mean, it's fine, but man, is it dull. Compared to the previous games, I mean, even X6 had an amazing soundtrack. I love a lot of the stuff in X6. But this one just feels like it was just thrown out there, like it doesn't even mean anything. The story involves this new character, Axel, who you play as. You have to wait until almost the end of the game to actually be able to play as Mega Man X, which is weird, because I'm pretty sure he's the title character. But his whole thing is like, I'm done with violence. I don't want to do it anymore. And he wants to negotiate with Mavericks, which is weird to me, because he of all people should know that some Mavericks aren't in a negotiating position. They're infected with a virus. Like, how do you negotiate with that? Oh yeah, I'm sure Sigma would have just sat down, had a cup of tea, and like, you're right. We shouldn't fight one another. Let's just talk it out. Yeah, that works, X. It's ridiculous. It's completely out of character for him, too. X has always been a pacifist, but he does fight when he has to. And at this point, like, he's intentionally refusing to and allowing Zero to risk himself by going out alone. And yeah, Axel shows up, and then he helps, and he's the ranged character for the majority of the game. But Axel's not X. Who is Axel? I don't even know who this is. The worst part is that I don't think Axel's even that bad of a character. He just shows up and they attempt to shoehorn as the replacement for X. You're trying to replace Mega Man X! No! That is not a good idea! And I could overlook probably most of what I've told you so far if other aspects of the game were good. Well, to begin with, there's voice acting in this game. Now, to be fair, historically, voice acting, when it is used, when it comes to the Mega Man series at this time, had never been exactly stellar. Mega Man X4 showed us that.
Where's that red Maverick that wiped out Garma's unit?
But at least there, X4 had really nice anime cutscenes that looked great. They were fun to look at, and the voice acting wasn't so bad that it ruined everything, and it was kind of funny. X7 is just hideous.
Phew.
Somebody please tell me I'm through with the worst of it.
Everyone sounds awful and completely out of character. Axel sounds like he's got something in his mouth the entire time he's talking, and don't even get me started on the Maverick voices.
Welcome to my silly stage. Here goes nothing. Yeah.
Why? Why would you do this? From a gameplay perspective, it switches back and forth between 2.5D and actual 3D. At no point does the game feel like it's good at all. They have a new level up system where it's bare bones. Before you could get different parts with different effects, so we've had that since X5. But now they've boiled it down to just speed and special and power. Like it's just pick category, stick it in the slot and go, and that's it. And weirdly, once you start leveling up, the game starts to feel a bit more like an X game, but starting out without any of the abilities, without any of the boosts, is way slower. It doesn't feel like an X game. It doesn't even feel like a classic Mega Man game. It's clunky, it's slow, it's boring and dull. Zero swings his sword like he's freaking got arthritis or something. Like he barely moves. Axel has a weird copy ability that he can do. Why you would ever do it, I do not know, because it's really hard to pull off. And other than that, he's just got his gun, but he doesn't have a charge shot like Mega Man. Eventually, you can play as X, which is nice, and get armor for X, but what drives me nuts about the armor in this game is, first of all, it doesn't even look very good. But even if it did, so when you play as Zero in X5 and 6, if you bump into one of X's armor pods where Dr. Light's AI shows up, Zero can get the armor for X. In this game, you're playing most of it as Axel and Zero. And even though they can find the armor pods, no longer can you actually get them as either of these characters, particularly Zero, who has done this before. You have to actually go back through the levels once you unlock X in order to get the armor. It's ridiculous. It's so dumb. Like, why would you make me do that? Why would you ever make me do that? Oh, also, I've been playing most of this game getting power-ups for Zero and Axel. Now that X is here, oh, guess how many power-ups he has? None. I gotta fill him up too. So he's not even very good when you get to be able to play as him. It's so dumb. And it's like, can you stop? Like, please, and consider what you've done. I need to explain something to you people, because you all know I get tilted over certain franchises that have completely ruined, you know, certain characters for me. Sonic 06, that's one. Super Mario, the Angel of Darkness is another. There is a third. It is called Mega Man X7. No, seriously. I didn't play a Mega Man game for years after I played X7. That's how angry this game made me. It ruined everything. X6 isn't great, but it still at least felt like a Mega Man X game. Yeah, they had some poor decisions here, but it was still fast, it was still fun, and it made me laugh. Like, it was, you know, an enjoyable experience for all its flaws. X7 doesn't have that. It's boring, it's dull, it's pointless, it's ugly, it's gross, it sounds bad. It just isn't a good game. It's terrible. And the notion that they could put something out like this and ruin, what was effectively a good franchise. Like, yeah, my misgivings with some of the previous titles aside, they were all playable. You could have fun with any of them as long as you were in the right mindset, even the more difficult ones. X7, I cannot fathom ever enjoying it in any stretch of the imagination. And the idea that we would ever get a sequel to it, completely, I threw out of my mind. Like, I didn't even want to entertain the thought, because as far as I was concerned, the series was done. But it was. Mega Man X8 is a thing that exists. I didn't play X8 for a very long time. In fact, I only finally played it within the last year. Why is that? Well, I knew it existed. I saw it in the store multiple times. But at no point did I even consider buying it, because X7 had ruined everything for me. And I just couldn't stomach the notion of getting disappointed again. So I didn't bother, which is a shame, because X8's pretty good. It's surprising too. They went with the 2.5D style, and it doesn't really look like it's that great, but once you actually play it, you realize what I'm talking about. There's so many good ideas here. Like, they added a bunch of new stuff for the series, as well as trying to channel the older games. It's fast again. It's solid again. It's responsive. It's enjoyable. It's fun. The bosses are well designed and fun. The game is challenging, but not unfair, and fun. I'm having fun here, is what I'm trying to say. X7 introduced the idea of having two characters to play as at the same time. The difference there is that if one character dies, you just lose, which kind of ruins the point of having two characters. X8 expands on this. Not only do you not immediately lose if one of your characters goes down, but in certain situations you can switch them and have them assist each other. Seeing Zero and X in particular work together in a game that you're in control of is exhilarating. And Axel actually a lot of fun to play because they actually made him different than X in that he can aim kind of in a Contra style. And he's got a new rapid fire situation. They introduced a money system, which is weird, but it's pretty cool. And you have to buy your upgrades with the money you earn from playing the game. It can make the game feel a little grindy in that regard, but I wouldn't say it kills the experience. Even without the upgrades, you can still get through it and have a ton of fun. You don't need the upgrades to feel like you're playing an X game, unlike an X7. The supporting characters are all here. There's some new ones like Lair, who really like Zero, like a lot. And Aaliyah, a previously established character, has a new design to make her look hot, I guess. We all know why they did that. Just saying. It's fine. Let it go. The voice acting, for the first time in the series, is actually alright. Like, everyone sounds pretty okay. I don't really mind it. Cinematics are good, in-game graphics are standard, but definitely pretty decent, and like I said, the gameplay is so solid, and the music is amazing! I was so happy when I finally played X8, and I was upset that I hadn't played it sooner because it really is the perfect apology for X7. X7 is awful, but X8 more than makes up for it, I feel, in a lot of ways. And if you haven't given it a try, I actually highly recommend it. It is such an exhilarating game to play, and makes me wish we would at least get an X9, especially since X8, like, kinda has a cliffhanger in it. Like, you wind up fighting Sigma again, which happens in every X game. You always fight Sigma. What is this deal? I don't get this. Like by the time X8 rolled around, I was like, seriously, man? Because he shows up and he's like, yes, that's right, X and Zero. You'll never stop me this time. Come forth and fight me, where I will utterly crush you. And I'm like, you know, Sigma is evil, but confidence goals right there. How many times have I blown you to smithereens? You somehow come back and you still think that I won't win. Again. Although, plot twist, Sigma, not the final boss. I'm not telling you who it is, I don't want to spoil that much, which is a first for the main X series. You do fight him, but not the final boss. But like I said, there's a cliffhanger here. Will we ever get an X9? I don't know. It's been like 15 years since this game came out. At this point, I don't really expect much. It's kind of up there with Legends 3 now. I guess a pretty decent size of the fan base that would love to see another X game. I would love to see an X9 and see this story finished out, maybe actually bridging the gap between the end of the X series and what happens with Zero. But so far we haven't gotten that. They just kind of left it. Maybe the X8 didn't sell too well, and maybe at the time, I guess I can't really argue with that because I didn't buy it. X7 was really bad, and I was upset, okay? I'm sorry. Maybe Capcom will consider it someday, because I really wish they would. Because I love the X series. It's my favorite Mega Man series. It's got so many good games, and I would say play any of them that aren't 7. Really. Like, I would seriously, like, 6 at least will make you laugh. 7, no. Do not do that ever. Next time on the retrospective, we're going to talk about the 3rd Mega Man game I ever played and the series it's in. I'm sure many of you have been waiting for this. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.